Now, I invite Mr. Andrew Feinberg, founder, chairman, and CEO Netcracker Technology and BostonGene, to deliver his keynote.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me, Tony. Thank you for having me. Salim, a great presentation. Thank you. It's been great learning from leaders in the region. And now I'm going to tell you my story. In fact, I'm going to tell you 3 seemingly unrelated stories. So before you question whether or not you're in the right room and head for the door, I promise that I will bring it all together as to why we're here and how this is very relevant to what we've been talking about for the past 2 days. I'd like to start my story by telling you about a man named Curtis. Curtis when we met Curtis, he was a 47-year-old, healthy, young man, an athlete, a marathon runner. He had a young family with a 3-year-old daughter, and he woke up one morning with a severe abdominal pain. He was rushed to a local emergency room where he was with questionable diagnosis. He was fortunate that he was living in Houston, Texas, so he ultimately was transported to the #1 cancer center in the world, where he was diagnosed with B-cell lymphoma. B-cell lymphoma is a type of blood cancer, and Curtis, as a healthy young man, was administered what's called the frontline treatment. He was put on a basic chemotherapy to address his condition. Unfortunately, it didn't work, so he was put on the next line of therapy, which is a very, very toxic combination of 4 chemotherapies, and that didn't work either. He was then moved on to the most innovative treatment that had existed at the time, called CAR-T, which is basically extraction of T cells from a patient, re-engineering of those T cells to fight cancerous cell, and then replantation of those T cells back into the patient. And this was the most innovative, and still is the most innovative, immunotherapy treatment in the world. Very expensive, over $1 million, and very toxic. Curtis progressed slightly following that treatment, and then, to this day, he is the only patient in the world who actually received that treatment twice. Nothing worked. Nothing worked, and Curtis was in bad shape. And at that point, his doctor recommended that he goes and sees this new upstart in Boston called BostonGene and undergoes a comprehensive genomic testing. So now I need to bring you back in time to a different story. This was winter of 2014. I was also at a very top academic cancer center in Boston, listening to the chief science officer talking to me about new innovation in cancer treatment, specifically about immunotherapy, which is a new treatment that had been approved by FDA a year prior that was thought to revolutionize cancer. The problem with that treatment was that it was incredibly effective in about 20% of the patients and very toxic, sometimes even lethal, in the other 80%. So I'm not a scientist, but I had been involved in cancer through charitable work for some years, so I knew some basic facts. I knew that our human body contains about 37 trillion cells. That includes cancerous cells. Bad news for all of us here, everybody has cancer. Everybody has cancer. The good news is that not all of us will develop it into a disease, and I'll talk more about it in a second. The way it works, and most of you are engineers, it's a geometrical progression. And the cells are multiplying 1 to 2 times a day, and within 40 days, we create 1 trillion new cells, including bad cells, including cancerous cells for those who have cancers, and about 330 billion cells are replaced every day. Now, this is a key point. The most important system in our body that monitors all of that and enables us to live cancer-free is an immune system. It's the system that recognizes bad cells and kills them. And cancer is nothing more than bad cells tricking the immune system into thinking that they're good cells so they don't get killed. And that's how masses and tumors and cancerous diseases are created and spread. So the idea that we can manipulate immune system, of course, is incredibly appealing. I also knew, of course, that cancer is a huge social and economic problem, and that it's 1 in 2 people in their lifetime will be diagnosed with cancer, and more people are getting and dying of cancer for a simple reason. We'll live longer. So this, and this is growing very quickly. So I said, this is amazing. What you're telling me is incredible. Now tell me, what do we know about immune system? What do we know about human immune system to enable us to manipulate it? And the answer was nothing. We knew nothing about the immune system. So what happened next could only probably be best described by an American saying, ignorance is bliss. Or to be kinder to myself, I probably will replace word ignorance with the word naivete. So, and 2 weeks later, we started a company, BostonGene, with a mission to truly understand a human body at a molecular level and understand and profile cancer patients so we could truly treat, and this later became our slogan, treat the patient, not the diagnosis. Back to Curtis, very quickly. By the time we met Curtis in September 2020, what you see on this screen is a PET scan of his lungs. This blood cancer metabolized into his lungs and other organs, and what you see is, it looks like it's a left lung, but in reality it's mirror image, so it's a right lung. That big tumor, 11-centimeter tumor, was blocking his lung. He couldn't breathe. If you actually see a little white line going to that tumor, that's the needle that took the biopsy that we ultimately received to diagnose him. He couldn't speak. He was spitting blood, and he was actually spending time with his daughter to say goodbye to her. We ran a 22,000 gene molecular profiling panel on Curtis. We recognized that he has very unique genomic mutations that are actually somewhat documented in other cancers, but as far as we knew, had never been documented in lymphomas. We correlated that information with everything that was available in terms of clinical trials, in terms of publications, in terms of treatments, therapies, and we came out with a recommendation that we presented to the doctor saying Curtis is immunosuppressed. And in order for any medication for him to work, he needed to first focus on boosting his immune system and then ultimately target the tumor. We recommended 2 different medications. The doctor prescribed those medications, and what you see is only 3 months later, this is the picture of Curtis's lung. He is completely cancer-free, and now 2 years later, he had been cancer-free, and we expect him to stay that way. Why am I telling you this? Thank you. This couldn't be a more humbling and proud moment. But why am I telling you this? I am telling you this because in this world, in the world of telecom, we live in what can only be described as the world of data chaos. Massive amounts of information is generated every day. I don't know what 181 zettabytes is, but I know it's a lot. It's an enormous amount of volume. More importantly, right here, and we heard a lot about it today, in our space, well over half of online retail traffic comes from mobile. And over 70% of operators, all of you, actually admit that their customers do not get consistent cross-channel response. We are infamous for online shopping abandonment rate. 94%, the highest online abandonment rate out of all industries are in telecom. And more than half of consumers attribute their decision to abandon their transaction to lack of personalization. Oops. At the same time, we know that companies that excel in personalizing customer experience and customer journeys generate up to 40% more revenues. Now, let me bring you to the third and final story in my narrative, and this is again a real-life scenario of a customer of a regional telecom service provider who is a gamer, who one day has a bad experience with online gaming, and she posts a criticism of a service provider and tags that service provider online. That service provider has truly digital BSS, having already undergone digital transformation, something that we talked a lot about today, that has active listeners that are paying attention and monitoring all social media. They find that remark, they dive into analytics, they engage proactive decision making, and they learn that the root cause why Nadine is having a bad customer experience and bad online experience is very simple. She has an old phone. Her phone is not capable of handling the pressure that she's putting on it. So, again, fully automatically, the systems analyze all of the competitive offers in the area, understand what other providers are doing, create the right plan with the right offer, dynamically priced, and send Nadine an email with a QR code and a buy now button that brings her to a competitive price with new hardware that solves her problems. She clicks on the button, she gets the QR code gives her directions to the local dealer where she proceeds to collect her pre-activated phone and continues to have a spectacular customer experience. So what we just did, we took an unhappy customer and probably a customer that would have departed and turned her into happy, loyal, long-term customer. And this is happening today, and this is why we need digital transformation, this is why we need digital BSS OSS, and this is why we need to make sure that we are incredibly customer-centric and customer-focused. This can only be done with next-generation digital platforms that enable us to deliver that omni-channel experience, that enable us to personalize our offerings, that enable us to truly customize the customer journeys to reflect the needs of today's consumer. And by the way, this works in both retail and B2B or enterprise sectors. This is possible today. This is happening today, and this is happening with Netcracker because we're actually taking this remarkable business analytics and pipelines and even some of the bioinformatic algorithms that we build that save lives today in cancer treatments with machine learning, with artificial intelligence, with big data analytics, and we bring this to telecom. And we're deploying the same tools and the same incredibly proprietary technologies on which we, by the way, hold over 100 patents that are saving life to change customer experience in telecom. So this is my story. Telecom to cancer, cancer to telecom, and I'm excited to be here and I'm excited to share this with you because the future is now. It is, everything that we talk about is possible. And what you've seen today is how we are able to leverage innovative technologies. In this case, the technology that enabled Curtis's daughter to have a father and get to know him is also changing the customer experience in telecom. So thank you all, and the future is here and it's now.